Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm going to be looking at Mexican Fenders and trying to answer the question, are they getting better? So here in front of me on my left I've got my old Standard Series Strat which I bought in 2001, so it's now about 20 years old. Over on the right is my much newer Player Series Strat, which is the current model that Fender offer. In the video I'll look at some of the features and specs and see where Fender have made changes and possibly improvements over time, and I'll also edit in some clips of me playing so you can make up your own mind about which one sounds the best. So I want to kick off just by talking very briefly about how I got these guitars and how much I paid for them. Because if we're going to ask, are they getting better, we also need to ask, are they getting more expensive at the same time, right? First thing I should say though, is both of these are effectively Fender's entry-level model of their time, the cheapest real Strat that you could buy. So this Sunburst guitar here, the Standard Series, I bought this in 2001. Really, it was kind of an accident that I bought this guitar. The story is that I'd bought an amp, taken it home, realised I didn't like it, and went back to the shop to try and get a refund. They wouldn't give me a refund, but they gave me a credit note, and later I went back and bought the Sunburst Strat. Even though I never intended to buy it, you can see from some of the wear on the fretboard and some of the marks on it, I got loads of use out of this guitar, and it was my main guitar for like the next 10 years. So it turned out to be a pretty good buy. Back in 2001, I paid £329 for this guitar. The Player Series over here, I bought basically because I really like this Tidepool blue colour. I'd seen these guitars had come out with a new range of colours and thought I've got to get one in this colour, and so I went in the shop, I tried a Tele and a Strat, both in the Tidepool blue, and came away with this one. This guitar cost me £519. So you might say, well, this is £329, this is £519. Of course they're getting more expensive, but you need to remember this is 20 years apart. Been online and done a calculation that says in UK money, 329 in 2001 is about the equivalent of 559 in 2020. So actually, you could say in real terms, the new Player Series is very slightly cheaper than the Standard Series was back in the day. Another way to think about the price would be to look at how much were these guitars in relation to their American equivalents at the time. So back in 2001, I think an American Standard would have cost you about £600. So roughly to go from Mexican Standard up to American Standard would have been twice the price. Nowadays, American Standard is replaced by American Professional, and if you want to go from the Player Series at £500, you need to go up to about £1,500 for the American Professional, so it's roughly 3 times the price to go from Mexican up to American nowadays. So one way you could look at it to say, relative to buying a full-blown American guitar, the modern Player Series actually offers a bigger discount and possibly better value in that context. I'm going to start looking at some of the features on these guitars now and comparing them side by side. Then at the end I'll come back and give my verdict on, are Mexican Fenders getting better? Starting at the headstock end then, the main change here is the logo. So the old Mexican Standard Strat used this kind of transition-y logo that Fender used a lot in the 80s. To me it looks quite dated, doesn't look particularly nice. Also, by the time this guitar was built, all the American guitars have gone back to using like the 50s spaghetti logo. So seeing that logo on a new guitar in the 2000s just screamed Mexican Strat at you. It also had Made in Mexico and the serial number on the front of the headstock. Whereas with the Player Series, they've gone to the spaghetti logo in line with the American guitars, glossed the front of the headstock as well, which is really nice, and moved the serial number and the Made in Mexico onto the back. So for me, just in terms of looks, that's a big improvement. In terms of the tuners, I think they're the same on both guitars and they work fine. I think it just annoys me that they're those ones where the string goes through the hole rather than down the hole, so you get all your string ends sticking out and poking you. So just a minor annoyance from my point of view, but no change there in terms of comparing these guitars together. Moving down to the neck, the big difference here is that the Player Series now has a gloss fingerboard, whereas the old Standard Series, of this era at least, had just kind of like a satin matte fingerboard. The big advantages I think of the gloss are, firstly, it looks nice. Secondly, it doesn't get as dirty. This picks up dirt like anything on the matte fingerboard. Thirdly, I'm hoping it's going to wear a bit better, because you can see along this bottom edge of the Standard Series guitar, there's quite a lot of wear just through sheer playtime. The other things, I guess, is some people might think that the gloss fingerboard gives you a bit more zing in the sound, and also it might be a bit smoother when you're doing bends and vibrato. In terms of the neck profile itself, I don't really sense much difference between the two. They're both quite slim, modern and flat feeling, both very smooth to play, but not a huge amount of character like versus a vintage style guitar. The one thing I would want to say though about the Player Series, which is just a little bit of a letdown, is the way the nuts cut. There's a bit of pinging in the top E string that I still need to get around to sorting out. So it's nothing major, but it's just a bit of a letdown from a quality control perspective. Moving down to the bodies, there's really not a lot to say. They're both made of alder, they both kind of weigh the same, and if you strum the guitars, the acoustic resonance is very similar. The only thing I would really comment on is the colours. So I've already said I really like the Tidepool here. The other thing to note though is with the Player Series, they've massively improved the Sunburst. So this Sunburst on this old Standard Series guitar is actually quite tacky, quite orange and naff. And if you put this next to an American Series guitar, you'll really see the difference. So it's good that they've really improved the Sunburst on the new Player Series guitars. Now looking at the bridge, the big difference here is that the old Standard Series guitar has got the 6-screw vintage style arrangement, whereas on the Player Series they've now moved on to the more modern 2-screw pivoting type bridge. Now some people say that this design with the 2 screws has got less friction in it, offers a bit more smooth use of the whammy bar, a bit more tuning stability maybe. Personally, it's not something I use a huge amount. When I have used it, it's kind of worked fine. On the Standard Series, I have the bridge pretty much tight down to the body and don't use the whammy bar at all there. So it's definitely a change between these two guitars. Whether it's an upgrade doesn't make a lot of difference to me, but I guess it's a matter of opinion. Now let's talk about what I think is the biggest difference between these two guitars, and that is the pickups. So the old Standard Series guitars came with ceramic magnets in the pickups. Ceramic magnets tend to get a bad press because people think they're not vintage enough, they've got no character, and they don't belong in Fender type guitars, right? But for me, in this guitar, these ceramic pickups work really, really well. They're fairly high output, at least by single coil Strat type standards. But what that means is they work really, really well for styles that need a bit of extra grunt behind them, like rock, blues, anything that needs to drive the amp a bit more. These are really good pickups. The other thing I'd say is they've still got really distinct characters in each of the 5 positions. The in-between sounds still work really, really well. So I think some people thought it was a bit of a weakness of these guitars that they didn't have Arnico pickups. But for me, it's actually a strength. On the Player Series, they have now moved on to Arnico magnets in the pickups. What that means is lower output and probably more vintage sounding, kind of more classic Strat for want of a better word. What this guitar really excels at is like spanky clean tones and slight break-up tones that, you know, Strats are really associated with. Overall, there's quite a big difference between the pickups in these two guitars, but I wouldn't say that one is better than the other or that moving to Arnico pickups is necessarily an upgrade. Really, it's just a matter of preference and kind of comes down to what your personal playing style and musical style is. A very quick comment on the electronics. They both look the same on the face of it and exactly what you'd expect to see on a Strat, but the only difference is on the old model you get the classic tone for neck pickup, tone for middle pickup, and then the bridge pickup has got no tone control, and we all know that can be a bit spiky sometimes. So on the Player Series they've upgraded this so the bridge pickup is also wired into the second tone control. For me, that's quite a good upgrade for something which is so simple for them to do. So having compared these two side by side, what's my answer to the question, are Fender Mexican guitars getting better? Well, overall, I'd have to say yes. This new Player Series guitar is slightly nicer than the old Standard Series model. The one thing I would say though, in practical terms, I've used both these guitars quite a lot and they both work just as well as each other. The upgrades I think that make a difference on the Player Series though are the gloss fingerboard, the new logo headstock design and the better colours. They just make for a guitar which is maybe a bit nicer to own even if it doesn't work any better than the old model. The one thing I would say though before I close out is these new player guitars aren't perfect. I've seen quite a lot of them and there's one or two things to look out for that I just call out if you're looking at buying one. Firstly, I already mentioned the nut issue on mine, so look out for that. Secondly, just on the plastics, I found one or two issues around mine and definitely saw issues on other ones I looked at, particularly where maybe the pick guard's coming away from the guitar. You know, I've got some dodgy looking knobs on mine as well. So just if you're buying one, have a good look round, make sure you're really happy with it before you commit your money. Anyway, that's the end of the video. Once again, well done if you made it this far through. Thanks for watching. See you next time.